From Top Gun dreams to ignited leadership, Leon Purton on unlocking potential in people and teams. Welcome back to Biz Bites for Thought Leaders. I'm your host, Anthony Perl, and today we're sitting down with Leon Purton. He is a former Royal Australian Air Force engineer turned award-winning leadership expert and author of The Ignited Leader, which just won the gold medal for leadership and management in the Axiom Book Awards 2025. Leon's about to share some valuable information about why leading yourself is the foundation of all great leadership and how to see the shape of potential and fit them to problems, and why we're not logical beings influenced by emotion, we're emotional beings influenced by logic. We'll explore all three dimensions of leadership, the power of creating vacuums for growth, and how one book read over a weekend in Canberra changed his entire career trajectory. So, looking forward to unpacking this and so much more. It's going to shift your mindset. It's going to give you some one percenters that will guarantee to change the way you think and the way you do business and the way you lead. So let's get into it. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Biz Bites. And I am delighted to have Leon joining me today because we're going to talk all things leadership. But firstly, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much, Anthony. Looking forward to it.
Well, I think firstly, the thing I like to do with all my guests is allow them to introduce themselves. So why don't you tell everyone a little bit about you?
Fantastic, Anthony. Yeah, I grew up in a small town on the northwest coast of Tasmania. We had about 10 cows, 20 sheep and 40 chickens with my two younger brothers. And we lived a pretty low drag life down there. But one thing I recognised about Tasmania is it is quite a relaxed community. And I didn't think that was where I wanted to spend the rest of my life. In year 9, I had a sleepover at a friend's house and we watched the movie Top Gun together. And he became inspired. He goes, all right, I'm going to be Maverick and you can be Goose, and we're going to go flying around in the skies together. Now, that never actually played out. In year 11, he dropped out of high school and joined the Navy. And I was sort of left a bit listless and didn't really know what I wanted to do. But I did have an interest in electronics, and this idea of being in the Air Force was still somewhat appealing to me. So I joined the Air Force at 18 as an avionics technician. So I worked on the electronics on the aircraft in the Air Force. I did that for a few years, but I knew I wanted a little bit more, so I ended up going to university and getting an electronic engineering degree. And then after that, sort of did 20 years in the Royal Australian Air Force, mostly on fighter aircraft and strike aircraft. Moved around all over the place, but over that time, I learned a lot, got exposed to a lot of different leaders and teams, and saw a lot of different things that really inspired me and some things that didn't. And during that period, I started to think a bit more deeply about what gave me energy at work, and I realized it was seeing the potential in people and helping them reach that. So in 2015, I started writing a leadership blog, and over the last sort of 5 to 10 years, I've continued writing, and culminating in release of a book in May this year called The Ignited Leader, which tries to summarize that handbook that I wish I could go back to 2015 and give to myself and go, here's some really important information that should help you out. Now I live on the Gold Coast, got 2 teenage kids, an ex-wife and a new wife. And so there were some trials and tribulations that I had to go through as part of my own personal journey there as well. Still like to stay fit, but I generally get a lot of energy and enthusiasm about that, seeing the potential of people and trying to help them unlock it. So that's the area I try and focus on now.
Wow, that's a lot. I love that. It's such a great story. Now, before we get into your details, I've got to ask a question that I don't think I've asked anyone before, but you mentioned your mate who went into the Navy. You're in the Air Force, you're in the Navy. What's the relationship between the Air Force and the Navy like? And have you still caught up with him since those days?
Yeah, we try and keep in contact, although the last couple of years it's been a little bit more challenging. But weirdly, my 2 best friends from high school, one joined the Navy and one joined the Army, and I joined the Air Force. So it's sort of like, I grew up in a household where I was the eldest of 2 younger brothers. It's sort of like having brothers. Like there's this rivalry that exists between you and you're always trying to one up each other. But at the end of the day, I've always got a lot of love and appreciation for each other. And that's sort of what the Air Force and the Army and the Navy are like together. There's this, the Air Force is better, no, the Army's better, no, the Navy's better. But at the end of the day, we're all trying to do and achieve the same things. And so there's just a genuine love and appreciation for each of the services. But it's a funny little place to live.
And what a crazy situation that you like. I don't know how many people would end up in that situation where you've got three mates and all take a different course in the military. I think that'd be fairly unusual. I suspect there's a number where they've gone to the same, but to go to three different ones, that's a little bit different.
It was unusual, I think. One thing I did hear though, when I was going through my recruitment process, I mentioned I grew up on the northwest coast of Tasmania, very, very small part of Australia. But what I've discovered through the recruitment process is that the recruitment population into the Australian Defence Force, the northwest coast of Tasmania, so a tiny little bit and a tiny little island, made up 6% of the Australian Defence Force. So there was a lot of people that ended up joining the military from out of that little, I don't know if their recruitment was really good or something in the water down there, but it was a little bit unusual that three friends all joined the military. But like you say, that we hit all three arms is a little bit unusual.
I hear the water's good for the whiskey as well down there. So
yeah, whiskey and wine and apples.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, look, let's fast forward from all of that journey, because you've definitely been through a fair amount, and how do you transform from working in the military in the electronics area to leadership? How does that process come about for you?
It's a really, really good question, Anthony. A lot of people who are, I guess, heavily technical in their backgrounds and their roles at work really take that on as part of their identity. You don't, say you're a project manager or something. You don't take on project manager as a core part of your identity. It's a job that you do, but engineers and technicians tend to take that on as part of a core part of their identity. And what's often hard to let go of is that core, ability to reach down and touch and influence the technical solution as you start to move through the different levels within the organization. And what I learned was that the military itself doesn't do a fantastic job at preparing people for those different levels. So I started to get into those positions of influence inside the military and realized that the people behind me weren't perhaps being exposed to the same information and the same mindset shifts that are really important as you transition through those levels in the military. So for me, whilst I'm an engineer, I feel like I'm a bit of a different flavor an engineer, where I'm heavily people focused, not technical and solution focused, which is often a distinguisher with the really hardcore engineers and technical people versus those that make their way through into leadership. Now, both paths are valuable, but what I realized was that we weren't doing a very good job of supporting people as they move from one role to the next. I wanted to try and unlock that. It was a moment, I vividly remember it. I was on a promotion course in the military. So they take all of the people, all the high achievers that are promoted, and they put them on a course together for 2 weeks in Canberra. And we learn about military management and historical military campaigns and the administrative processes that you need to understand within the military. But I didn't feel like it prepared me for the next role. But a fellow attendee on that course, an air traffic controller, gave me a book. He goes, "I hear you, Leon, speaking about leadership, and you're like really passionate about it. I've been reading this book and I think you really like it." And he gave me that book, and on the Thursday afternoon, and all my spare time on Friday, my Saturday and Sunday in a military accommodation down in Canberra was spent just reading this book across a whole weekend. And I gave it back to him on Monday. I said, "I think that's the most succinct message that's ever reached me about what we need to change for leadership." And it was a book called Turn the Ship Around by David Marquet, who was a US Navy submarine commander. And it's still influential to me to this day, so much so that when I wrote my book, I reached out to David Marquet and asked him to write the foreword to my book, to which he agreed, which is a fantastic privilege. But instrumental to my journey was that choice from an air traffic controller at a room in Canberra just going, here, I think you'd like this book. And it just unlocked this spark in my mind about how to think about things differently. And I'm like, if I can think differently about leadership in this way, then perhaps I can help other people also start to think about things differently. Felt like a
I
really
think it's
long-winded answer, but I feel it was a
no,
bit.
no, no. And I think, but I think it's a really fascinating combination of the engineering and the military that, on the face of it, would think that, okay, it's got to be about precision and getting things done. And there is an element of that, but it's at the end of the day, you're dealing with people. And I think that's the interesting, cross section that you have there, that people are so intrinsic to what happens in the military because they're the variable, right?
Yep.
And understanding them is really important. And I can see how that has been a huge influence on where you've taken things.
Yeah, since I was in the military for a tick over 20 years, which is a long period of life, all your formative years. And in the last 6 years since I've left the military, but I'm still near it in the work that I do, I've noticed even more that the people are the capability. People talk about the military for the hardware and the things that it can do, but the people really are the capability, the thinking, feeling, doing humans that make up and comprise the armed forces. And in fact, any of your workforces out there, they're the real capability. And if you can reach each individual person and unlock just an extra small percentage of their potential, then your ability to achieve more, do more, and be more happy and productive at the end of the day is magnified. So I noticed that in the military, and it is still true for the work that I do now with organizations.
And how frustrating did you get, or do you still get, perhaps, in the comparison between where you've got in the electronic engineering space, you've got things that you can find a solution for, right? If the solution will either exist or you can develop something that can exist, but that's not so easy in people. You can see potentially, okay, this is where the issues are, but change is a difficult thing to implement in people. So there is, on the other hand, to what we were saying before, there is a vast difference between those two.
100%, Anthony, you've nailed it. A couple of threads that I'll pull on there. The first is that oftentimes technical-minded people or solution-focused people always try and step into the gap. Hey, there's a problem, and there's a gap of understanding to get to the resolution, and the solution-focused people always try and fill that gap, and it helps you move from problem to resolution. So it streamlines the process. But in that gap, that gap that exists between problem and resolution is the growth opportunity for the people around you. And oftentimes, those technical focused people can rush to fill that gap and not leave space for the other people around them to potentially grow and evolve and work out what needs to be done to fill that gap themselves. So that there is the magic, I guess, in leadership is that transition from technical or tactical expert to growing people who can be technical or tactical experts is allowing other people to work out how they might fill that gap themselves. The second thing, Anthony, you may have heard this before, is that, I forget who said it, but we believe that we are logical beings influenced by emotion. The truth of the matter is that we're emotional beings influenced by logic. And so too often engineers think we're the former. We're logical. Everyone's logical. Everyone believes and sees the same things. Emotions sometimes get in the way, but that's not the truth. So if you can make that pivot from understanding that you don't need to be the answer to every problem, and that emotions are real and people are influenced by them, and you need to acknowledge them and work out where they are and where they need to move to, then you can be a little bit more successful in growing teams that can achieve outcomes or changing things that were in one way and need to be in another.
I'm interested as well that, having come from a military background means that you are effectively employed. And you're following orders, as you do, even in business. How does that transition to then becoming business owner, and then in what you do day to day, in overseeing people who in themselves own businesses, how do you build that space of understanding and relatability?
I think the the thought that goes through my mind, Anthony, when you start to talk about that is what I call the cornerstone or the foundation of the. If you get this right, then you can achieve in whatever area that you try and set out to achieve in. And too often, what happens in parts of the military or certain parts of the workforce is that you're often always, like you mentioned, told what to do. You need to do this thing by this time, and you go and do the thing, and then you come back to them and they go, okay, now you got to do this thing by this time, and that keeps going on and on and on again, and that, you achieve outcomes, you're productive, but the pivot comes when you start to acknowledge that you're leading yourself. So you're not just taking the information and the guidance and doing the thing. You're thinking about, why am I doing the thing? Why is it important? Why is this timeline important? How does my contribution assist the other people in the organization? You start to scale your thinking from doing to leading in achieving your own personal outcomes. And if you can get that foundation right, you can lead yourself. That's sort of like you throw a rock into a pond and there's a big impact point in the pond, but then everything ripples out from there. But if you can get that leading yourself right done, you can learn how to get stuff done by yourself under your own motivation without being told. And you can identify why it's important and how it fits into the bigger picture. You start to lead yourself, then you can start to lead teams, then you can start to lead organizations, and then you can start to lead business outcomes. And so that shift from extrinsic motivation to intrinsic motivation is essential in unlocking that ability to lead yourself. So don't just be carrot or stick, somebody telling you to do something or you get punished, or do something well and you get rewarded. If you can shift to that intrinsic motivation that I'm doing this because this is important and I want to do a good job, that's the foundational bit. That's the rock as it hits the pond.
It's an interesting visual.
Yeah.
And which also brings me to that idea as well, is that how much of an influence is the visual in teaching people for you? Because I imagine, particularly from an engineering background, that it is very visual.
Yeah, I have a lot of the people I work with have started calling them Leonisms, Anthony. They're little analogies or metaphors that I try and use all the time to try and make a point. People have picked up on the fact that I use them a lot, and I think you're 100% right, Anthony. Words don't often connect with ideas. In fact, let me just step back a little bit. The most important skill I think you can have in today's workforce, Anthony, is the ability to quickly take new data, turn it into information, and turn it into knowledge, and then turn it into wisdom. And the quicker you can get new data through to wisdom, the more effective you can be in the workplace, because the work is changing so much. There's so much rapid change in the world. Every new data point is an opportunity for you to work out how it impacts you and what you're trying to achieve, or how it impacts the people you care about and what they're trying to achieve. So that transition from data to information to knowledge to wisdom is the most important part to get through. And what I found is, if you can couple data and information with a visual, it makes it easier for people connected into their own knowledge and wisdom databases in their heads. So one of the reasons I always try and use those visual metaphors, even in spoken word, if you're not drawing it on a board or whatever it might be, but even just in spoken word, is because it helps people better connect this new information with the wisdom they already know and understand, because it gives them a foundation to couple it onto. So again, I've used another little metaphor in my explanation of metaphors, Anthony. That might be a bit meta, but I think it's really important to acknowledge that humans store information in a very, very structured and coherent way, and everything couples to something else. That's how it's stored in there. And so if you can help paint the picture of why it's important and how it fits together, it helps them store it away.
I agree. I mean, I think it's often that people get caught up in their own way of learning and forget that others may be different. And, here we are largely on a mostly audio medium. I think
Yeah.
most people will be listening to the podcast. Those of you that are watching on YouTube, fantastic, because you're watching.
Yeah.
But there's also then we produce other materials out of it in the written format, etc., because people learn and take things in a different way. But is there a commonality in terms of leadership where you find that there's a particular way that works better than others, or is it really just different for different people?
I think it's one of those it depends answers, Anthony, which isn't exceptionally useful, but let me give a small piece of information that might help you. I think the art of leadership is that, in fact, my own personal leadership philosophy, Anthony, is to try and see the shape of people and the space in problems and then fit the people to the problems. And if the space you leave is too big, so that person has got too much of a gap, too much of a stretch to fill that space, then you failed them. And if the gap is too small, then you've also failed them. And so what I found, Anthony, is that if you get better at recognizing the shape of people, so what are their competence, character, attitude, aptitudes, all those different things, elements that make up the human, sometimes you need to reach each individual person in a slightly different way, so you can help them understand what they need to, how they need to grow. So to answer your question, it depends answer is really around, you need to know your people, and you need to know what motivates them, what their aspirations are, why are they working in your team, what how do they like to get shown appreciation, what are all these different facets of the human that you're interacting with. And then from that you can start to better understand, okay, this is the kind of person that I need to email them ahead of time and tell them I'm coming to have a conversation with them, so they give them time to read the information and pass it before I come and talk to them about it. Or this is a person I need to get a whiteboard and we need to draw concepts and big pictures on, and so that I can get connected with them that way. This is a person that works better if I stand in front of and talk to them. This is a different person if I give them resources that are validated by some academic journal, then they're going to be more receptive to it. So all those different things or facets are part of a leader's role in starting to learn about the people in their team and starting to unlock the individual brilliance that each of those people have, and how to best access it.
So you talk about different strokes for different folks, for one of a better term.
Perfect.
And but I'm interested then in terms of leadership, right? Because I imagine this is a bit of a double-barreled thing, where on one hand, do people have to be ready and say and put their hands up to say, I want to step into leadership, or I am a leader, but I need to get better. And then on the other side of things is, how willing are they to make those changes? How easy is it also to make those changes that enable them to be better as leaders?
Yeah. Again, it is a difficult tension to strike, Anthony. And one part of me says that you should be continually just incrementally challenging your people such that they always feel like they're growing and developing, right? You shouldn't get to the point where they feel like, I feel stuck. I feel like I'm ready for the next thing. I don't know how to get to that next thing. It's unknown to me. But if that's the case, if you get to the point going, I want more, I need more, the challenge isn't enough, I've got this part understood, I need to learn something new, whatever it might be, then again, you've got to start to analyze these problem spaces that you might have. And the analogy, the Leonism, Anthony, that I use in this case is, if you think of all of the work that you do as a box, right? Then people inside of your team fill some of that space inside of the box. They do things. It's their role to do it, and they occupy this part of the space, right? They can be technical experts, which might fill up big solid blocks. They might be connective experts who are like the liquid that join all the technical blocks together. And what I found is that most leaders occupy the space of gas. Not that all leaders are just all gas and no productivity, right? But that the leaders fill the extra space in the box to make sure all the work is done. And what I found is that a leader's role is to carve out little vacuums. So little pockets of space inside of there that have clearly defined boundaries and constraints so that people don't get overwhelmed. But then if you go, that's your problem space now. You work out how to solve it. I'm not going to stand in there and wait for you to earn the right to take that over. I'm just going to carve this piece of space out and I'm going to give it to you to own. And if leaders can keep that as a bit of a mentality to always look for those opportunities, because the box isn't fixed. There's always new problems that come up. There's always different challenges that come up. The box is always changing shape, or you're always changing the shape of the people inside of the box. You'll always be able to find those opportunities to either pull people up and go, I think you're ready for this problem, or I hear you, you've been saying that you're ready for the next challenge, and here's the challenge that I'm setting for you.
It's an interesting idea as well of being a leader who's keen to, as you say, enable people through that process. But are there just people who are not interested? And then as leaders, there's that challenge where, they're just happy doing what they're doing, taking the paycheck. And quite frankly, there's nothing wrong with that. That might suit some people's lifestyle. So how does that frustration manage for someone who's a leader and keen to be seeing more when they're just not interested?
So again, it's that different strokes for different folks, as you said before, Anthony. I often say that, I use a mechanical example, but all of the cogs have to fit together to make the big machine work, right? And inside teams, your machine has a purpose. Your machine has got a role to play in the bigger global machine, however it fits in together. And some people are happy just being a shiny little cog. That's not to diminish their role. In fact, they're probably fantastic at their role, but they don't care about how the machine works or why that part of the machine's not working or any of those other problems. They're just happy to be the person who turns up, does the work, and then goes home again. And that's perfectly fine for them. It's part of that knowing and understanding the motivations of your team. They might not be motivated by career growth or leadership development or something else. They might be motivated by earning enough money for a family holiday each year, or having the freedom to be able to do school pickup every day, or whatever it might be. That might be their motivation at any point in time, and those motivators can change. But your role as a leader is to start to understand that and support them in whatever they're trying to achieve. And sometimes that's just do the work and go home. And for other people, it's I need more, I want to understand more, help me understand more.
Let's talk a little bit about the leaders themselves. I mean, there's the willingness to lead, as I was saying earlier, and there's the ability to lead. Now, whether that's change or it's just not within them, I mean, do you prescribe to that? Are there different levels of people who are more capable than others, or is that leadership quality within everyone and can be taught?
Yeah, great question, Anthony. There's two thoughts that I'll expand on there. The first is that most leaders are better at a certain type of leadership than others. Now, I often talk about people leaders, process leaders, and performance leaders as three different leadership dimensions. And people will generally have a strength in one. So you might be really good at achieving outcomes and goals. You might be good at clearly articulating what we're trying to achieve and when we need to achieve it by, and people will get behind that and they'll achieve those outcomes. You might be instead good at documenting the process and making sure everybody understands the process and people know what they need to do. Or you might realize that it doesn't matter what we're trying to achieve or the process we're trying to use. If we got the right people and we support them in the right way, they'll be able to achieve those outcomes. So the first thing I want to acknowledge, Anthony, is each person's going to have a different strength domain. And it doesn't matter if they're in a position of leadership or not. They're going to be better at one of those three things. They're often going to be good at another one. Potentially not great, but they've had to practice it a little bit and they'll be okay at it. And so they'll be able to achieve a little bit with their secondary domain as well. So that's the first thing, is recognizing that people have different strengths. And sometimes people are put into leadership positions where they're not leaning into that strength. And if they're not, they're trying to force their own personal strengths into a position that doesn't resonate with that type of style of leadership. So that's the first area of disconnect that can happen. To your second point, I think that all people are people are capable of leadership, Anthony, but for some people, it's a different level of leadership. For some, it's just lead yourself. I'm going to be responsible for me. I'm going to be self-deterministic. I'm going to be autonomous. I'm going to take control of my sphere, and I'm going to work it until it's done. And then I'm going to take some more guidance on what we need to achieve, and I'm going to work out how to do that and do that myself. Everyone's capable of that. Some people are capable of leading teams. They are ready to understand that their role is no longer to be the best. Their role is to grow a team of people that can be the best. And that takes a different mindset shift. And then the third type of people are people that are capable of leading leaders. So you make that transition from leading a team of contributors to leading a team of leaders. And now you need to grow a group of people who can grow a group of people who are good at getting stuff done. And so your skill set changes again. And some people aren't suited for the different levels of leadership. And that's okay. Some people can take on the skills and take the mindset shift on. Some people have that adaptability and some people don't. But what I found is that if you do work with the right person who can understand who you are and what your strengths are, and then start to see where you might be self-limiting your ability to reach those second or third levels of leadership and start to unlock that, then you can start to achieve more than perhaps you thought you were capable of achieving.
I may be making a bit of a generalization here based on no real knowledge, but does the military in fact really teach you, conformity? That there is one system, this is how the system works. If you're going to be a leader, you've got to mold into the system. And if that's the case, how do you bridge that gap by going outside and saying, well, actually, because based on what you're saying, there are different types. So you've come from one and gone to something quite different.
Yeah, I think what I've found, or at least I can reflect on, Anthony, it is a bit of a generalization, but there's always some truth in generalizations, is that the method of flowing information to the authority. So if you're a lower level military employee, you generally have to keep pushing the information up until somebody makes a decision, and then that comes back down and you do something different. To a different mindset where you push authority to the information. So where the people that have the most amount of information are the people helping to shape and make the decisions. The military is generally a bottom to decision maker process, and say a tech startup or some other type of more entrepreneurial organization might be someone who's making individual decisions in the moment based on information they're presented to them. So there are different levels of, I call them organizational bureaucracy, that are inherent in different sizes of organizations. And the military is a large organization with large amounts of bureaucracy. What I've seen though is that the mindset shift required can help you better manage that flow of information. So as an example, if you've been, this new information says, I think I should make this decision, rather than push the information up, push your intention up. So I intend to go, and based on this information, I intend to do this. And that gives your chain of command in the military or your direct manager outside the ability to understand that you know the problem, what you're trying to achieve, and the motivation behind your decision. And they can just say yes or no. They don't have to make a decision. They go, yes, go ahead. So that method of management of upwards flow for information to the decision maker can be reshaped in whatever organization you're in, but it has to go through a mindset shift to achieve that outcome from the individual, and then you start to influence and shape the culture that you're within to better support that type of decision making.
When you talk about leadership, are you talking about people at base levels? Are you talking about high levels of who you like to work with and who you think can be best impacted by your Leonisms? Is that the best way to say it?
Yeah. Part of the challenge with changing a culture around leadership development, Anthony, is reaching the point in the organization where the amount of horizontal conversations about problems is the same as the amount of vertical conversations about problems. So that middle management style area inside of organizations is where you can have the most organizational impact, where the peers need to work together to solve a problem, and they're also communicating down to their teams and up to their own managers. So where those levels of communication are equal is where you can have the most influence in organizations. And normally that happens at the middle manager level. If it's happening right at the top, with the top few people, then you've got a decision-making problem. If it's happening right at the bottom, you've got a transparency problem. So I am trying to reach the executives that can put together workshops with their middle management people, or bring them together so I can reach those middle managers to help them understand better the role and impact that they can have inside of organizations in changing the culture from potentially a culture of driving people out the door to a culture of driving results and getting performance.
It's probably a perfect segue when you start talking about Driveway to talk about the book, The Ignited Leader. Tell me a little bit about what inspired you to write the book, but also if you could put the book in front of particular people, who would you put it in front of?
Yeah, great, Anthony. So I mentioned to you earlier in my in the conversation, sitting in a room and reading a book across a weekend, and how that sort of reached inside of my brain and changed the way that I think about things. Coming out of that, I mentioned that I started to write a blog post. So I released a blog every Tuesday for over 2 years that I called Leadership Spark. And the reason behind that, Anthony, is that when I read that book in the officer's mess in Canberra, it implanted a little spark inside of my brain that turned into a bit of a flame for being inspired about trying to unlock the leadership potential in others. And so I wrote this blog article called Leadership Sparks for over 100 weeks. The goal of trying to transfer a spark from my little brain into somebody else's brain that could potentially, hopefully, maybe one day catch fire and help them understand the type of leader they wanted to be and how they wanted to impact the world. And nestled out of that is this now concept of the ignited leader, where if you're a leader who's capable of leading yourself in such a way that you shine so brightly that the people around you start to get affected by your internal flame, and you can start to pass those little sparks to the people around you. And that's how you change the culture of an organization from doing to leading. And so the concept behind the Ignited Leader is that sort of a book broken in 3 parts. The first part is, what is ignited leadership? The second part is, how can you lead yourself so well that inner flame shines really brightly? And then the third part of the book is, how does that now flow through your team and through your organization and through your culture? So that's a little bit about why I wrote the book and why I've segmented in that way and why it's titled in that way. And recently, Anthony, I was stoked to receive the gold medal for leadership and management in the Axiom Book Awards for 2025. So the judges on the panel also resonated with that message. My goal, though, Anthony, is sort of twofold. One, I want to reach every person and go, here, read this and try and unlock that. Now, that might not be achievable, but it's sort of like a method of introducing myself to those people that realize that maybe I've got a bit of a leadership problem in my organization. Maybe my attrition rate's too high. Maybe my productivity's too low. Maybe my workplace satisfaction scores are coming down instead of going up. Maybe they're really resistant to change and I don't understand why. I want to reach those people and try and give them some information about how I see and think about leadership, which could potentially help them change how their inner flame is glowing and starting to affect those around them. But also, if they can reach out to me and go, hey, Leon, would you come and help me and my teams start to fight against these problems that we're seeing in leadership?
So many great ideas in there. I want to ask you about your inspirations, though. I mean, you've certainly talked about the book, but who are the inspirational leaders that you see, and what are the, and more than that, what are the things that you admire most in them that fit in with those three elements that you just talked to?
I guess this, I'm not going to not answer your question and then I'll come back to answering it, Anthony. A quick little Leonism for you again. I'm really at the moment in the pursuit of red threads, Anthony. And I want to, it's a metaphor I borrowed from Marcus Buckingham's book, Love Work. But if you imagine that as you move forward in life, Anthony, everything you're exposed to weaves behind you into a tapestry. And you can go back in time and take a slice and have a look at that tapestry. And what you'll realize, maybe you go back 10 years ago, most of what you were exposed to and seen and did is just all meh. It's just bland, beige, blends into the background. You don't really remember it. But there are a few things that you did. Maybe you did them with people you love and energize you. Maybe you're doing things that was really impactful. Maybe you felt the right balance of tension in the challenge of what you're doing, and you felt really energized by what you were able to achieve. But those elements will be bright red inside of that tapestry of life. They'll stand out to you. They'll be memorable. As you go forward in life, the goal is to try and bring more of those red threads closer together, so that you're doing more of what energizes and things that you love and is really impactful more often. For me right now, Anthony, that's what I'm trying to do. And the people that are inspiring me most are the people that I'm able to reach and see them start to unlock their own potential. So see that growth in people, the change in mindset, their ability to change how they think about things and how they influence outcomes is part of my red threads journey. That's what I'm trying to impact. As to leaders, I'm really heartened by people like, I'll use examples of their attitude first. So people that don't back away from the issues that are in front of them, realize that they're a bunch of humans trying to solve human problems involved in that. They're empathetic to the people that they're dealing with. They realize that they're not the hero in the journey. The people around them are the hero in the journey, and that the only way to achieve the outcomes that are really, really important is by getting a lot of really clever people energized about that problem and self-motivated to go and achieve it, not because they're trying to direct or achieve it. So there's many examples out there, and I write about several of them inside of the book. Most of the introductions to the chapters have an example of people that I think espouse the Ignited Leader values, and encourage you to have a read of it. But there's also an interesting case study around some celebrated leaders like Jack Welch and Elon Musk and Mary Barra and Richard Branson inside of the book, which start to pick apart where I think people perhaps fall short on some of those things that I mentioned before.
I think it's there's so many great qualities in all of those people that you've mentioned, and in other things that that you talk to along there. It's what strikes me is as well that you talk there about having great people around you, and it's often a thing that I've heard before: surround yourself by great people. But what I love about what you were saying there is you've got to make them great, rather than necessarily just going and saying, right, I'll have this person, this person, and this person. They're all great already. Now let's, that's nice if you can do that, but you're not picking an international football team here. You're working within a business context, so you don't have that ability to do that. So you have to build that.
You absolutely do, Anthony. That's what I talk about. If you can, you'd be surprised, perhaps not surprised, not the right word, the level of inspiration you can get when you see somebody who's lower on self-confidence, potentially really technically capable but unable to really make that manifest, and to see them grow and shape their own destinies and start to influence really significant outcomes going forward is such a powerful fuel for leaders inside of the organization. Now, you're 100% right. I've always said to people, in fact, I think I picked this up from the great Jim Collins on a podcast that he did, that before you worry about what you're doing or even why you're doing it, be really clear about who you're doing it with, because it's the who that will define your success. So 100% agree with you, Anthony. If you can get the right people pointed in the right direction, you'll be amazed at what you can achieve. And sometimes you don't get to choose the people, but you can shape their attitudes towards the work they're doing. So you're 100% right. One part of it is try and find good people. If you can't find, if you're given a team and you don't have a lot of control over that, try and find the greatness within each individual person and try and unlock that.
I love all that. There's so many great ideas and all of that. I'm going to encourage people to buy the book, The Ignited Leader. We will make sure all of the details on how to get a copy of that are in the show notes. But just before we wrap things up, I need to ask you the question I like to ask all of my guests. What is the aha moment that people have when they come to work with you that you wish more people knew they were going to have?
Such a great question, Anthony. The one thing that I think people will, if they come and work with me and they reflect and take on board some of the teachings, the aha moment that I hope they walk away with is that all greatness comes from the greatness you can unlock within yourself. So your ability is only restricted by your mentality about what you're trying to achieve. Now, there's been plenty of books and publications written about different elements of that, but until you internalize that belief, until you give yourself I call it the incompetence confidence cycle, Anthony, the ability to say, I'm not good at this yet, is exceptionally powerful. And if you can take it on and be willing to take on that learning journey, you can develop confidence, which unlocks more opportunities to learn more, which unlocks more confidence along the way, and becomes a self-perpetuating machine of ability to achieve excellence. So, Anthony, that's the thing that I wish that all people could get access to. They could realize their own zone of genius, how to tap into it, and how to use that to achieve really great and significant things.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. There's been amazing things that you've given us there. The Leonisms are great. And I think keep them up, because we're going to see many, many more of those. And I think I'd love people to come and write in and tell us which our favorite one was during the episode, because there's a lot of great information there about leadership. And I think it's an often talked about but underestimated. And I think that finding the right person such as yourself to be able to bring that out in people is huge. So thank you so much for being a ignited guest on the program, if I can borrow that term.
Yeah, absolutely can, Anthony. I love you to borrow it and use it. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you and your audience. It's been a fantastic interview. You've done a great job. Really insightful questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone, for listening in. And of course, we will make sure that all the information on how to get in contact with Leon, including accessing the book, will be included in the show notes. Again, Leon, thank you for being part of the program. Love the conversation. And we will be back next time for another episode of Biz Bites for Thought Leaders. Hey, thanks for listening to Biz Bites. We hope you enjoyed the program. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. Biz Bites is proudly brought to you by Podcasts Done For You, the service where we will deliver a podcast for you and expose your brilliance to the world. Contact us today for more information. Details in the show notes. We look forward to your company next time on Biz Bites.